the final product is just icing on the cake. I love being able to share my final photos and say, look what I captured. But getting out is the best part. If I didn't enjoy getting out, I wouldn't be doing this. And especially setting up your camera and being able to just set it up and enjoy the night. That's why I focus on that so much, is because I get to enjoy my night sky and I get to see it for myself. When I'm involved with a lot of people on nights the northern lights are out, or whether or not there's meticulous and clouds, whatever might be out, my goal is to enjoy it for myself.
Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and in today's Rewind interview, we are chatting with admirer of the night sky and astrophotographer Justin Anderson about capturing all of the cosmic activity that happens when most of us are asleep. But first, the Beginner Photography Podcast is brought to you by CloudSpot. Sell your photos through prints, products, and of course, digitals. With CloudSpot, you can set up a storefront in minutes and start earning more with every shoot you deliver. Grab your free forever account over at deliverphotos.com and only upgrade when you are ready. Justin is called Manitoba's Aurora Guy, spending many nights outside with his camera pointed at the sky. The aurora is something that I have not shot, nor seen for that matter, honestly, but his images make me feel like I'm there. They're truly incredible shots of things that, I can only picture in my head that I would love to see in real life. And he does it extremely well. So in this conversation, you'll learn just how Justin finds these unique locations that lend itself to the beautiful night sky to add context, making a richer photo. How to embrace the process and appreciate the joy of not only shooting, but also experiencing the night sky for yourself, even when maybe it's colder than most would enjoy. And if you love something, how to make time for it. Often having to balance his full-time job with his passion of shooting the night sky, but also needing sleep, that's pretty important. It's easy to say, I'll capture it another day, but that just is not an option for Justin. If you love something, you will go out and make time for it. So again, there's a lot to learn in this one. So with that, let's go ahead and get on into today's interview with Justin Anderson. Justin, my first question for you is, when did you know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
I started taking photos about 4 years ago. I've always had a cell phone in my hands with a camera and just enjoyed taking the photos. But about 4 years ago, I went up north fishing with my father, and I really wanted to take photos of the northern lights when I was up there. And when I did, I got my mom's old camera and I just learned how to use it for that weekend. And I went up there and the northern lights were dancing, so I was able to get a few good photos of them. And then since then, after that, I got my first DSLR, and it kind of just sat dormant in my closet, and I didn't do much with it. And then from there, storms started to pick up. I got some photos of lightning, which really brought the passion up, and realized that I can make a cool photo of lightning. And then there was no storms one night, and I just started capturing the stars, and I just loved the stars. I love seeing them, and I've always enjoyed looking up at the stars, always enjoyed watching meteor showers, anything really. And from there, I just really wanted to learn and keep going and perfect that skill. So that's what I just do. I always go out with just an intent to take a cool photo, and that's about it.
Just take a cool photo and that's it. Oh my gosh.
That's about it, yeah.
I wish that, sometimes I get lost. I know a lot of others do as well in the simplicity of photography. I wish that I could just boil it down to that same feeling every time. I love that. When you went out that first time where you went fishing with your dad, you said that you took, I believe it was your mom's camera, got a few photos, liked them, got back home, got yourself a camera. Was it that trip, or was there one photo in particular that you captured and thought to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I might actually, have a proper go at this and try it for myself?
Yeah, I know exactly which photo, and I could share that with you after the call. But I was outside, and I was with my parents at the time, but they live on an acreage outside of town. So I was sitting and enjoying the lightning show that had just gone by. There's a bunch of really bright lightning strikes. And a few days before that, I had seen something either on Facebook or Instagram of just a really cool spreadsheet on how to take photos of lightning. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I was just enjoying it. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to just grab that camera that's in my closet, see if I can take a cool photo of lightning. I set it up, a few pictures in, and I got a really cool lightning strike off in the distance. And I said, oh, I love this. I'm going to go out chasing, because I always used to enjoy going for a drive with my dad, watching storms. So I went for a drive, and I was about 3 miles from home, and I set up my camera, and there's a perfect rain shelf in the photo, and then there's a lightning strike that went through the center of the photo. I didn't edit it or anything because I didn't know how to edit, and that photo came out, and I was so proud of that photo. That came up, and I believe that was 3 years ago now. So, and that's the photo that went, wow, I can take cool photos. And then I went out the next storm and took some more photos, and the next one, and just kept going until I realized, wow, this is really cool that cameras can pick that up.
Before all this, would you consider yourself, I guess, a creative person or somebody who was interested in visual arts like this?
I wouldn't say so, no. I would say that I was more so enjoying just, I'd have a cell phone and I'd take a photo of a sunset, and I'd have family members go, wow, that's a great photo. And that would be about it. And then that's really all that I would get. I'm not too creative when it comes to my own personal stuff. I'm incredibly organized, which I think really helps with taking more photos because I can have locations and I can look at it now with a creative eye, but I don't think I was born with a creative eye. I think that was developed.
But that first photo, or that, yeah, let's go back to that lightning photo, because today I look at some of your work and think to myself, he gets it. He sees it. I know that when you go out, just by looking at your photos, I can tell that when you go out, you can easily visualize the scene and the photo that you want to take. So at some point, that skill developed for you. If you think back to that first photo, was there any sort of thought process as far as composition or anything, I guess, more advanced? Or was it just simply, I'm going to go out, take a photo, and just see what happens?
Absolutely no idea what I was doing. I just I went down a gravel road and I set up my tripod on a nice safe spot that I could pull over, and I just started clicking photos just constantly. And sure enough, that lightning strike happened. I did get a cool building in there. And like I said, I'll share it with you after the call. But it is a really cool composed photo. But I didn't think of that at all when I was out taking photos. That wasn't my purpose. I was out saying, I want a lightning strike. And that was it.
Yeah, and you got it.
Yeah.
So when you decided for yourself, you know what, I think I'm really going to take this seriously, learn more about the art of photography and start taking more photos like this, what was the hardest part for you technically to nail when it comes to photographing lightning or the night sky? Because I know from experience that just putting your phone or putting your camera on auto isn't going to do it. So what was the hardest part technically for you to learn there in the beginning?
I'm pretty good with settings. So the settings itself were not hard. I was able to figure out the rules that you can follow, the rules that you can break a little bit. So those part wasn't too hard. The editing process of these photos definitely comes in play. And I'm no expert in editing by any means. I don't think anyone is, because there's so many different ways that you can edit a photo that just, I can take a photo from 3 years ago and edit it again and it looks a lot better. So editing, I think, would be the really tough part that everyone really struggles when it comes to the night sky. But yeah, I say for the settings and focusing and stuff like that, I didn't struggle at all with that because I'm young and I understood most of that already. Mm-hmm. But when it came down to editing and just finding a location that was really cool, I follow all the big time photography accounts, the NASA accounts, all these really cool photography accounts. And I looked up to them, but I think that really struggled because I wanted their photos. I wanted to take something really cool. I wanted a cool desert or a nice old building. And I think you have to start off with just very little. Just start with just trying to capture the stars and that's it. So I think you can jump too much into it too quickly, which could really harm your photography and push you back a little bit.
Did you do that like right away? Were you trying to be too ambitious? Was there a time where you were too ambitious and, it totally fell flat?
Definitely. I mean, when I first started out, I think I was a little bit too ambitious. I took a lot of photos and I tried to get the best possible stars, the best Milky Way possible with the cheapest gear. So, and you still can, but I think I pushed really hard. And I could have very easily burned out from that, but luckily I didn't. I was able to push through. But I think one of the big things that people struggle with night photography is when you're out taking photos, like for example, I'm out chasing the Northern Lights. I get one or two of those a month. So I only get to go out once or twice a month with my camera and learn. So really, in a matter of 3 years, you only get a few chances to use your camera throughout that time. Plus, it's minus 30 degrees Celsius out, so you don't want to be out in the cold. So really, the practice part really can be a problem because the whole night is great practice. But when you get those photos back to your camera onto your computer, that's when you get to look through them and go, these photos are really good. This is what I could have done differently. So that's one of the really hard parts with astrophotography is just that you don't have a whole lot of time. If you can get out for a full week during the new moon cycle, that's only 7 nights of taking photos. But during the day, you can get out anytime you want, really.
That's interesting. I had never really consider that fact. I had always assumed, not assumed, but just kind of thought to myself, if you want to shoot at night, just go out and shoot at night. But you brought up an interesting fact there about with it having to be new moon, that meaning that there's no moon in the sky, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you don't want any moon in the sky. It depends on what you're going for. Like the photo behind me, there was a moon in the sky, but it wasn't very bright.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a different kind of, this is noctilucent clouds, which don't really happen at night. They happen closer to astronomical twilight. So it depends on what you're photographing. But if you want stars, if you want really dark skies, you have to, for one, get away from the bright cities. So that could be an hour drive, depending where you are. It might be even more. You might have to drive 3 hours. I'm one of the lucky ones that only has to walk 5 minutes. But it really depends because you also don't want a moon in the sky. So any kind of moon can really drown out those stars. But it depends. You can still practice with the full moon. It's just not as enjoyable, really. So you really want no moon, no light pollution around, and that can be really difficult. You might go out Saturday night because that's your only night off, but it could be cloudy too. And then that means you miss the one night for the new moon and you have to go for the next month. So practice can definitely be a problem when it comes to astrophotography. You just don't get enough of it.
What is it about astrophotography that you love so much? Because during the daytime, you don't have these challenges. It's not as cold. If the sun's out, that's actually a good thing. You can get more photos. So what is it about astrophotography that really sings to you?
If I'm being honest, to start off with, it was hard. And I didn't want just regular photos. Sunset photos are cool, but people taking them with their cell phones, I was like, oh, I want that photo. So when I started taking photos of the stars, I loved that people looked up to it and went, wow, I'd love to take a photo like that. So that was really my driving factor immediately was, for one, I love the stars. I've always enjoyed looking up at them. But for two, people looked at that and went, wow, that's really hard. He must be an expert. I'm an amateur. I'm not professional by any means. So that was my driving factor. And then now I just love learning about the night sky. I live for the night sky. I'm out almost every single night that it's clear and there's no moon. And I just love looking up at the stars. And I also love taking photos of cool buildings and cool stuff in Manitoba. My province is pretty boring. People think that Manitoba is the flatlands and it's really boring and there's nothing interesting here. But as you can see by the photo behind me, it's pretty gorgeous. And I love showing that.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It's funny. So I grew up in like Northern California and it's very mountainous and it's beautiful and we have the ocean not very far from us. And then at some point I moved out here to the Midwest in the US and I realized right away, I was like, this place is flat. There's really not much going on here. But I think that it's one of those like grass is always greener type situations. Like no matter where you are, people from here are like, why would you move from California? But I think having that perspective, there's a lot of things that once you stop and you look at it, you can really appreciate a lot more. Like one of my favorite things out here in the Midwest, in the flatlands, is just simply the clouds are entirely different than they are in a mountain range where they're probably more drawn out and fluffy. So I appreciate that view and that understanding that you have of the beauty of your location. So when it comes to the astrophotography of this, do you think that your photography benefits from your location? Do you think that you could do it? I don't want to say anywhere else because, obviously you wouldn't be able to do it anywhere else. Down here in the States, we don't have the aurora and whatnot as much as you do. So talk to me a little bit about that. Do you think that played, I guess your location specifically, played a big part in you falling in love with the aurora and wanting to capture it as well?
I think a big part of it, I've lived in Manitoba my whole life. I grew up here. I have family 30 minutes down the road. So I love Manitoba. But when I was at the start of 2020, I actually moved to Alberta and I got to live in Alberta in the mountainous range. I got to go hiking and join the mountains. And I lived there for about 9 months. And then I finally moved back to Manitoba to be with my family and be closer. And also, I love the mountains. I would love to go tomorrow for a trip to the mountains and enjoy, take some cool photos. But Manitoba is just home to me. I love the prairies. I love seeing the flatlands. You don't realize how much of a pain mountains can be when you do a 3-hour hike to get to a cool spot for your aurora to find out there's a mountain in the way. You can't see them. So definitely the mountains help, but I love the flatlands. I absolutely love it here. When I lived in Alberta, I actually chased Comet Neowise for 12 days out of the 3 weeks that was here. So, and that was working full time too. So I would I'd work from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. From 4 to 7, I would have a nap. From 7 till 9, I would edit a photo, make some supper, make some snacks for the night, do whatever I needed to do. And then from 9:30 to about 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd be out taking photos of neowise. And then I'd be up and I'd sleep from 4 to 7 again. And I'd be up the next morning for work. I did that for 12 nights. Like, I have that all documented as well on my website. But I did that for 12 nights total, and I loved every minute of it. That was a huge part in making me a better photographer too, because I got 12 nights of experience in a 3-week span. That's
Normally,
huge. That's unheard of. And the moon was a factor in a lot of the photos, but I did get really lucky with the new moon phase with neowise, and it really brought out. I got to get flatlands with prairies on one side of Alberta. I got the mountains on the other side. I got some really cool photos that I look back on and some great memories and some great lessons. And then now, even though I could go to the mountains and take photos, and it's a little bit easier because you have a great mountain and it's a little bit easier to find the foreground there. Here, I just love finding those old buildings, those old locations that you post it and people go, wow, I know that location, or that reminds me of home, or that reminds me of my growing up. So I do love Manitoba for its a lot of history here too.
yeah, that's always a good feeling when you get a little bit of recognition for your photos and you can tell that it really means something to somebody. I want to go back to going out and that crazy schedule that you just laid out for me right there. When it comes to capturing, did you say that it was a comet? Is that what it was?
Yeah, Comet neowise.
So with a comet, it's here and then it's gone, right? It's a very
Yeah.
defined amount of time. How did you plan for something like that? Was there one photo, like a bucket list photo that you had that you really wanted to get, or was it an experiment every single night?
It was mostly an experiment. I started out with Comet neowise because we have lots of comets that go by the Earth, but I don't look at them because I don't have a telescope. I look at stuff with my naked eye rather than a huge telescope or a zoom in lens, which I'd like to down the road, but for now, this is what I focus on. And I started seeing some photos of this comet neowise. It looked really cool. And we haven't seen a naked eye comet in years. It's been, I think, 20 some years since we've seen something naked eye that was that bright. And I started seeing photos of comet neowise, and I kind of just brushed it off as oh, cool, a comet. That's cool to see it come by. But then I started seeing photos of it pop up in 400 millimeters, and 300 millimeters, then 200 millimeters. Now I have 200 millimeters myself. I can take that photo. So then 200 millimeters, I saw that one, and I was like, I'm going to go out and take that photo. So I went out, started chasing neowise, and I saw it for myself with my naked eye, and I was blown away. And then after that, I was in Manitoba for the first little bit of it, and then for the first 3 nights, and then I went back to Alberta. And a friend of mine was in Alberta, and we both said, there's a comet in the air, we cannot sleep. We can't miss any chance. So basically, we just went anywhere possible. One night in Alberta, there was fantastic northern lights, the best northern light show of the year almost. And we went straight east because that's where the clouds said they wouldn't be. Straight west said it was going to be clouds, but west is mountains, east is flatlands. So we went to a beautiful old barn, set up, ready to go, and it was solid clouds. And I have a time lapse of there that's just all clouds. I had people calling me from Manitoba saying, I've never seen the aurora this bright before. There's a comet. I can see it in the middle of the city. We were seeing photos from west of Calgary of great aurora, the comet, the knocked loose cloud. It was basically a bucket list shot, and I missed it. And that night really haunts us because we went the wrong direction. But then that night, we also got some good photos of Comet neowise on the highway, and a really cool photo of the neowise, the aurora, and really cool leading lines into the shot, which is one of my favorite shots just because of the story. So, and then from there, we went west the next night because we wanted mountains this time. So we went west, and sure enough, we got great photos of neowise over a nice pond with a fire off in the distance. And then the next night, we said, all right, where are we going to get away from the clouds? So we went north. And then the next night, we went to Waterton, which is about 3 hours one way. And we drove down there for just a single night and then came back that night. So yeah, we drove all over just trying to get as many cool foregrounds as we could, but mostly just the experience of being able to say, I chased that comet, I lived for that comet, and just a great memory.
Yeah, for sure. Those are great stories. I love stuff like that. So when it comes to, I think, astrophotography, tell me a little bit about more your style, because I'm thinking if somebody's listening right now, maybe they haven't gone to the show notes yet to check out your photos, they're thinking astrophotography, that's like galaxies, that's stars, that's like deep space type stuff, full frame of just stars. But the photos that you're taking, and you're talking about foreground and all that stuff. So tell me more about your style of astrophotography.
Yeah, so my style of astrophotography is called landscape astrophotography. So my focus is not so much the stars, but more so the landscape around me. So a cool building, a beautiful lake, a pond, something to draw your eye to the photo. And my goal is to not have the stars being the subject. I want my foreground to be the subject, and the stars are going to add to it. When I first started out, it was mostly just I let the stars do the talking. I'd have a flat foreground and just barely a foreground and then just stars. Then finally, I realized that I want my foreground to do all the talking. So that's why I focus so much on my foregrounds. My style is pretty, I think, unique to myself, because when it comes to stars, either your foreground is too dark or your foreground is too bright. But then if your foreground is too bright, your stars are going to be trailing, or your stars are going to be really noisy. So my entire goal behind it is to have a clean foreground, that's what it would look like in person with your own naked eye, whether or not you have a little bit of light on to make it a little bit easier. But I don't want noise, because your eyes don't see those noise. So I want a nice clean foreground, but then the sky, I want it to be exactly what it looked like. I tend to not stack any photos when it comes to the sky. This photo behind me is just one single photo of the sky. The foreground is 959 different photos.
Whoa.
So I stack for the foreground, and instead of stacking for the sky, which a lot of astrophotographers do the opposite. They stack the sky to get a lot of detail in the sky and very little noise. But then the foreground is just a single photo that they just stack in there. Mm-hmm. My style is just completely, I want a clean foreground, and I stack for the foreground, and then I'll paint the sky back in. But this is exactly how it looked. If I was to take a picture of the back of my camera at this time, this is the photo that you would have seen on the back of the camera, just not or a little bit more noisy.
Why is that? In a world where we go online and try to watch YouTube videos and tutorials of, whatever it is that we're interested in your case, astrophotography. If everybody's doing it the exact opposite way, what made you say, hold up, I'm going to do it this way instead and see if I like it?
Well, just a little bit of practice and just experimenting. I learned this stacking software, or this ability to stack in Photoshop for removing people in photos, just the median stacking. If you have a landscape and there's a bunch of people walking around, you take 100 photos, then you stack it, and it'll remove the people because they're not in every single photo. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of started thinking that noise is very random. So I tried playing around with it, and I learned that stacking the photo the same way, but for a landscape, you get a really clear, crystal clean photo without any noise, because that noise is random. That noise is moving around like those people would be. From there, I started playing around with it, figuring out moving into Lightroom, editing beforehand, and then stacking afterwards, and then realizing that this really is a great tool, but then being able to go back into old photos. The reason that a lot of people will take a very long exposure. For this photo here, you might want to take a 3-minute long exposure at really low ISO to get very little noise, but a lot of detail in the foreground. I used to do that a lot, and sometimes I will, depending on my location and how much time I have. But I find a lot of the time I don't have time to do that. And if I forget to do that and I move my camera beforehand, I go, oh, shoot, I messed up. Now I have to make a composite out of that image, and that's not what I want. I want my image to be exactly what it looked like. So being able to use this method, I'm able to go back into old photos of old barns that I didn't take a long exposure photo for and fix that foreground and have a really clean foreground, even though I never took a foreground photo. I was only taking sky photos, but I increased the noise, and then I stack it to remove that noise.
Wow. So just in case anybody's listening and is not aware, stacking is where you have a series of photos, you take one right after another, and then you bring those into Photoshop. You said your editor of choice, and then you can use all the information from all those photos to remove certain things, right? In this case, noise from your photos. So are you changing your ISO at all to change the amount of your noise in the photos, or you're just shooting at the same ISO, but because you have so many photos stacked, Photoshop is able to find the clearest parts and then remove the noisy part of the noise?
Yeah, exactly. I just leave the
Wow.
ISO, leave your exposure exactly as is, and then that's it. For this photo here behind me, I was taking constant 1 second long exposures because it was fairly bright out that night. But in those exposures, I didn't have any detail in that building behind me. There was no detail at all. It was just pitch black. You barely even see it. So then afterwards, what I did after I was done taking photos, I took 20-second long exposures and I took 8 of them. It was a little bit bright, but that was okay. And then it was still a little bit noisy. So then I stacked those 8 exposures, and then that gave me a really clean output of just the building. Then I had fireflies, and all the lights you see on the ground there, they're fireflies.
Yeah.
So I took every single photo from the night, which was 950 photos from that hour-long session, and I stacked them, all of them, into just a program called Sequitur. By stacking them, I was able to get all the lights of the fireflies, and they showed up like star trails. They just continuously showed up wherever the light was, they were there. But then I really decreased the size of that photo, so I wasn't working with a 10 gig file, and just completely downsized that file and moved that into Photoshop. And that's 950 photos plus the 8 photos for the foreground. I just brought in those fireflies for the light, and that was it. And then the sky was just a single photo. So that is exactly what you would have seen there if you're sitting all night watching the sky. You'd see fireflies, you'd see that building, you'd see the reflection, and you'd also see the noctilucent clouds in the sky, as well as the sunset.
So how much of your photos change dependent on the like scenario of that night, like of the situation of that night? Are you showing up and thinking to yourself like, because I'm thinking of this firefly example that you're giving right here. I'm sure that you didn't show up thinking, oh man, I'm going to get some pretty sweet fireflies here like tonight. Like that's what it is that I want to capture. But it happened after the fact. So I guess the question that I'm getting at here is what percentage of your photos are reactionary versus pre-planned?
I pre-planned for as much as I possibly can. I actually did know about fireflies because this is just down the road from my house, and I got in a photo of fireflies the night before. So I knew that they were coming out. They're starting to get into firefly season. And I actually was talking to a friend about how he wants fireflies in his photo so badly. So I wanted to beat him. So when I did set up for a foreground, of course, fireflies were the least of my concern. If I didn't get fireflies, it wasn't going to be the end of the world to me. My goal was those noctilucent clouds and creating a nice balance between the building on the side and then the reflection, but also keeping the sky adding on to the image, because the sky is your focus, really. So once I got done, I saw the fireflies happening throughout the entire night. I was standing there enjoying it and seeing the fireflies buzzing around my face, and I knew that they were going to be great. And then that's when I started thinking, how am I going to get these fireflies into my final photo? There's things in the night sky. Chasing the aurora can be quite difficult sometimes because you don't know which direction to look. You start in the northeast, you end in the northwest. Well, I have 15 millimeters that I can use, and sometimes 15 millimeters is just too much. It's too wide, you have too much sky, very little aurora, and it just really can be boring unless you have an amazing show. So I try to go into 24 millimeters or 30 millimeters and try to punch in just a little bit. But then you have the problems of what happens if something to your left, or the aurora starts dancing to your left. I tried not to move my cameras. I want to focus on that subject that I'm working with. And if I miss it, and I enjoy it with my naked eye. So that's where I try to think about what could happen. I get one camera facing northeast. I get another camera facing northwest. There was actually a photo I got of Steve back in March, which is just a strong thermal emission. And it's basically a force field between the aurora and no aurora. And I got a great foreground lined up. And Steve happens basically straight west or straight east or straight above you. So it's a little bit more difficult to capture because you're not facing that direction. You want to face north. You want to get the cool show. So I had both cameras set up, one facing straight north, and then the other one was actually facing straight northwest, but with a lot of blank space because I knew that Steve had potential to come back that night. He'd shown up earlier, so I knew that there was a chance again. So I was like, I want to capture it if it happens. And I was able to capture Steve perfectly. It lined up with the image exactly how I wanted it. Mm-hmm. But if there was no Steve, then I would have gotten absolutely nothing. I would have missed a good portion of the show of the aurora. So really, it's a matter of, do you want to risk it or do you want to just go with just a cool photo?
Right. I guess that's why you got the two cameras, right? Just in case.
Exactly. I want a third. So
Yeah. So I'm trying to do the math in my head here, and let's say, for this photo right here behind you, you said that there's almost 1,000 photos stacked into this one shot right here. If you're shooting at like a 1 second exposure, I mean, even if you're super optimized for time and very efficient, that's almost 20 minutes of time right there. That's after you've created the composition, you've already set up the camera, your settings, you put up a tripod. Does that sound like a short amount of time to you? How long does it normally take for you to... Okay, let me rewind. You show up to a location. What's the first thing that you look for?
well, if I show up to a location, I hopefully have scouted it throughout the day. So I know what I'm looking at. I know that either I have permission to be there or I don't. So I have to sit from the road or I have to sit from wherever. So when I get to my location, I look at what I'm going to be photographing. In this case, this is facing northwest-ish, more north than northwest. And I was looking at it and going, what do I want? My foreground is straight northwest almost, so I'm going to be focusing on that. Where do I want the building? Do I want it on the left? Do I want it on the right? There's actually a second building here just to the right of this one. So where do I want this? Where do I want both buildings? So that's when I kind of move around, look at it and see where do I want to set up the cameras. Then I'll take a quick test exposure and see how it looks from that spot, move as I need to, but then line up. The huge part about astrophotography is don't be in a rush. 20 minutes is actually really fast. I think I was at this location for both 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh, wow.
So I just simply sat there and enjoyed it. I just sat back. I always have a lawn chair with me. I just set up both cameras, let them take their photos, and then I sit back and enjoy it. I'll check them periodically just to make sure the settings are still good. The exposure still looks good. I don't have to bump up any exposure or slow it down or anything like that. But then I just sit back and enjoy the show and I let the cameras just do their work because I've set them up. I don't want to be touching them a bunch and accidentally bump it and then things are off a little bit. So yeah, I just sit back and enjoy the show. When I'm watching the Northern Lights, I set up both my cameras and then I just sit back and enjoy and I'll just watch, which is the best way to do it.
Yeah, no, I bet. Having never seen, the aurora in person, I would imagine that it's an amazing sight to see. So let me ask you then I guess, how does the camera setup go? Because it sounds to me, I'm assuming that you have some sort of timer, intervalometer. What's the purpose of that? Just to be able to have a series of stacked images? Is that it?
Yeah. So one of the big things about nighttime photography is any motion is bad. So if you don't have a good tripod and it starts to move a little bit, that your photo is wrecked. You can't use that photo. So you do not want any motion. So you want a good sturdy tripod. But another thing is you don't want to shake your camera. So if you have your camera, or you have your hand on the button, the shutter, and you press that shutter down, it might shake the camera just a little bit so that your stars are no longer sharp. Or you might twist the camera just a little bit, and then your foreground moves just ever so slightly. And in that photo, it becomes blurry. So one of the big things I do is on my one camera, I have a remote always connected to it. At all times, it's connected and it's just wrapped around the camera. So when I need to, I just simply use that button, take the photo, but then it has a locking feature. A lot of people will set their photo or their camera's intervalometer to 3 seconds, and then every 3 seconds it takes a photo. The photo's 2.5 seconds, then you have a half-second buffer. I'm lazy. I just simply press the button and it just locks into place and it'll just take constant photos. One reason for that is I live in Canada and battery life is awful in Canada, especially in the -30. So I just press that button and lock it in place and it just goes. I don't need to worry about AA batteries with me at all times. So if the batteries die, I know that the camera's still going to be taking photos because it's a button. It's just a constant press. So that's on one camera. And then my other camera, I have the same thing, but I don't leave it connected. I actually just have the internal intervalometer and I just tell it to constantly take its own photos. Just every 1 second, it'll just take another photo. So as soon as it stops, it takes that one. So that's what I do. I just leave them set up with their intervalometers, whether it's built in or whether it's external, and then just let the photos just go. Whatever I capture is whatever I capture. And if the photo comes out bad and I have to move it, then so be it. I might move it 2-3 times in the night, depending on what I want to try. But I love sitting back and enjoying the show. Kind of makes it more than just photography to me. Now I get to sit back and enjoy.
Right. How do you know when you're done? I guess, because essentially you could just let the camera run forever. Like, what's that balance of getting enough photos and knowing when to pack it up and get into a warm car?
That's the $1 million question. I'm lucky to live in this area, so I can just run home and be done, sort of thing. So that's a big question. That the Northern Light chasing is probably your hardest one, because when it comes to Milky Way, you can go home at any point. The Milky Way is going to be there tomorrow,
Yeah.
so it's really not the end of the world if you miss an hour. But if you miss an hour of Aurora, you don't know what you're missing, and you might miss the best part of the show. So that really can be difficult. There are things like I watch the data. If the data starts to drop off and it looks awful, then I'll start to pack up and go home. I also have to think about tomorrow because I do work Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. So this night I was out till 12:30, and I said, you know what? There's noctilucent clouds are still happening, but they'll be out hopefully again tomorrow or the next day. I'm going to enjoy. We're going to get out and to get photos then. And I got the best part of the show. I got the photo that I wanted, so I'm done. Monday or Sunday night, I was out taking photos, and it was a little cloudy, but noctilucent clouds were out again. I got a really cool photo of an old barn, sunset, all that. And I was actually home. I was probably only taking photos for 10, 15 minutes because the clouds started to move in. And the noctilucent clouds are still out along the horizon, but I just said to myself, I have a million photos of these. Do I really need these photos? Because with not moving your camera around, I get one photo or two photos from a night, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because I'm stacking and I'm only taking one of the skies. So really, out of a full night of, I might come home with 2,000, 3,000 photos, I have 3 or 4 photos from that night, and then a time-lapse sequence. So if I don't move my camera, if I don't have a different foreground lined up in that spot, then I start thinking about, okay, I've got my one photo that I'm going to post to Instagram or Facebook. That's my photo that I want. I've got enough for a time lapse, and then I'm good. That's enough for me.
Let's talk about how to best prepare for something like this, because I know that there's a lot, as you were mentioning, in terms of weather. There's obviously the gear that you got to figure out, and just like knowing what are good conditions to be out in. So if somebody's just getting started, like take me for an example, right? If I were to go out and take photos at night, I would just wait until tonight and I would just go out and just hope for the best, right? Like, what are some ways that I can make sure that conditions are going to be fair enough to be able to capture something decent?
Yeah, well, one of the big things is clouds. That's like the one thing everyone has to deal with, unfortunately. If you can't see the sky, you can't take photos of it. So if you're chasing northern lights, if you're chasing an eclipse, whatever you might be chasing, you can't take photos of it if it's cloudy, unless you're chasing clouds, and then you're in good shape. But no, if you want, the one thing you should really focus on is the clouds. You want to make sure that you're going to a location without clouds. There's apps that give you a good idea, but the best way to tell is just in person and seeing if there's clouds. I had plenty of, like, in the comet chase, clouds said they were going to be clear to the east, and I went east and it was cloudy. So that can really mess you up quite a bit. But the forecast for clouds is one of your big ones. If you're going to take photos of the sky or the stars, whatever you might be, you kind of want to get away from the moon. A little bit of moonlight isn't the end of the world. So coming off the first quarter moon on either waxing or waning, that's a really good time to go, because a little bit of moonlight will light up your foreground, but it doesn't drown out the stars too much. But no moon at all will be really dark skies wherever you go. Another location you want to find a spot with no bright lights. So in this case, I'm about 30 minutes out of town in this photo here, and I don't want bright lights to the north because that would drown out the dark skies. So I keep the bright lights to my south. They're behind me. If I'm facing north, my target's to the north. My bright lights are to the south. If I'm shooting the Milky Way, which is to the south, my bright lights are to the north behind me. So that's one of the big things, is want to get away from the bright lights.
So about how far away do we need to be? I mean, is there some sort of like standard rule?
The farther, the better. But unfortunately, that can't happen sometimes. You can get to a dark sky preserve, and there's a scale. It's called Bortle scale. There's Bortle 1, which is incredibly dark skies, and then Bortle 9, which is middle of New York, middle of Winnipeg. So you don't want to be in Bortle 9. And if I was out taking photos, I'd want to be away from Bortle 4 or less. So 4, 3, 2, 1 would be your locations. It's very rare to get into portal 1 just because of how bright city lights are getting. Even the small little communities are really taken away from the dark skies. So portal 1 is quite difficult. For me to get to portal 1, it's about 3 hours. But my backyard's in portal 3, portal 2, and that's more than enough to take photos of the sky. So the further away you can get, and there's maps online. If you look up the maps, dark sky map finder, you'll be able to see exactly your location and how bright the city lights are and how far they span. But if you go and look, the further away, the better. So even if you can get away 30 minutes outside of the city, it's still going to help and it's still going to get you some practice, but it might not be as much as you would get if you're an hour away from the city. And it depends on how bright the city is. If you're in New York, it might need to go for a bit more of a drive than if I was in Brandon, like my hometown, for example, which is a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. You said dark sky map there. I'm going to be sure to link that in the show notes because I wouldn't have any idea how to measure the night sky on my own. So I'm glad that there's other people who do stuff like that so that we can just figure that stuff out on our own. Let's talk about gear a little bit here. It's not something that we talk about very often, but, you know, in a specialty like this, there's always going to be questions. I know that there's always a debate over full frame, crop sensor, zoom, prime, you know, what sorts of settings. So can you walk me through what you have found to work for you as far as camera and lenses?
What works for me is whatever camera I can get my hands on. So I always like to tell people that the best camera is the one in their hands. Whether that's a DSLR, whether it's mirrorless, or whether it's your cell phone, I've been out taking photos and my cameras are set up and I'm enjoying the show, but I want to take a photo to post to our Facebook or keep people in the loop. This is what I'm seeing. So quite often I'll just take my phone, set it on my extra tripod or press it up against my boot and put pro mode on it and take a simple photo. And I had someone ask me to find a print off of that photo, even though it wasn't even edited of any kind.
Wow.
I said, no, sorry, that's on my cell phone. Better quality photos, but photos on your cell phone are fantastic. The cell phones are getting really good, especially ones within the past 2 or 3 years. I would say absolutely get out. You can take photos with them. So the gear that I have, I stuck with Canon. I have a Canon 6D Mark II and then a Canon 6D Mark I. I like them both because they are identical bodies. The buttons on them are absolutely identical between the two. The only physical difference is one has a flip out screen, the other one is a fixed screen. So when I'm out in the middle of the night, I don't have to worry about which button I'm pressing because I know them like the back of my hand. Mm-hmm. Both buttons are identical. I just press the view button and whatnot. I have a few different lenses. I've got a Tamron 15-30 f2.8. I've got a 24 millimeter f1.4. I've got a 50 millimeter f1.8. And I love using them all. The Tamron is fantastic, but it is a $1,500 lens, so it is a bit of a killer on the budget.
Yeah.
But it is fantastic when it comes to corners and just how sharp the corners and the stars are. And it's really nice having the ability to go between 15 and 30, depending on what you're shooting. But I absolutely love the 50 millimeter. And the photo behind me is taken on the Canon's Nifty 50 for $150.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I've got some amazing photos. I've actually been posting a lot of photos on my Instagram of the Nifty 50 of what I've been taking with it, just to show that $150 lens on a $900 camera takes some fantastic photos. Really, it depends on what you want to use. I would recommend getting a prime if you can, just because they're a little bit better when it comes to night sky, but stick away or get f2.8 or wider. Try to stay away from f4s, especially if your camera is one of the lesser bodies, just because you want wide aperture, which will really help because you can't push your ISO.
So when it comes to the lenses, it seems like everything that you mentioned there was pretty wide. Oh, wow. Look at this. 2 episodes in a row, my phone has gone off, even though it's on silent. Something's going on here. Okay. I apologize for that. So
no problem.
You mentioned there, though, most of your lenses are definitely on the wider scale there. Is that specific to landscape astrophotography?
Definitely. Like I want to keep my landscape involved. So and I use full frame. So when I'm shooting at 24 millimeters, it's quite wide, but it's good for the sky. I want to be able to capture the aurora. I have an 85 millimeter. I have a 120-400, but those tend to stay in my bag a lot more often because 85 millimeters doesn't really look great when it comes to aurora. You can't get the cool structure in there. It's pretty much just all green. So when it comes to my style landscape, I want to get 24 millimeters, 15 millimeters. I want to capture that building as well as the sky and have enough room that you can still see the giant band of the aurora or the giant pillars, depending on what I'm capturing. So I definitely try to stick wider than 50 millimeters. I do want to get a 35 millimeter f1.4 just to play around with, but anything wider than 50 millimeters is kind of my forte, my favorite.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's talk about, we all love gear. We all love buying gear. Has there ever been a piece of gear that you were like, I have to have this? This is going to make my photos so much better. And then at the end of the day, it didn't really contribute to anything. Maybe you don't even use it anymore.
I'd say remote shutter. I have two of them, and I only use one for my Canon 6D Mark I, just because it doesn't have a built-in intervalometer, but the intervalometer for my 6D Mark II is built in, and I use it all the time. That's my main source of intervalometer. So I have two intervalometers in my bag. I only use one of them because I have to. I think that's one of the things. If your camera has it built in, just use what you have. Tripods, I wouldn't spend $700-800 on a tripod. I've got a few of the $100 or $50 tripods from Amazon, and they're fantastic. I do have a $200 or $300 tripod now that I absolutely love. But tripods, I would just get something that's sturdy. You don't need to spend $1 million on your tripod. Other than that, a nice red light for at night if you want a headlamp and with a nice red light on it, because red will make your eyes, would keep your night vision. A white light makes your eyes clamp down, and then you have to readjust as soon as you turn the light off. But if you have red, you can still see at night and look up at the stars, and you can still see with ease what's happening in the night sky.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so red light is definitely your best friend in night sky.
And they have like headlamps with red lights inside? I love that. I'm going to have to check that.
Actually, most headlamps out there have that red light built in, and people don't realize what it's for, but it's for your night vision. Not necessarily just for nighttime photography, but anything. If you're running around at night and you need a little bit of light, but you also don't want to lose your night vision, that little red light is really handy.
Right. One of my favorite movies growing up was The Hunt for Red October, and I always remember there was some scene, I don't remember exactly what the scene was, but it was just like everything within the submarine was like red. And I remember asking like my stepdad at the time, like, why wouldn't they use just like white lights? And that's pretty much what he said. He was like, ooh, yeah, no, that can really screw up your eyes. Using the red light really helps. So that's good to know that, I guess, when you're out in this sort of condition and you're really trying to get work done as far as your camera goes, you're not going to screw anything up there. So I got another question for you here, and that is, when it comes to astrophotography, I want to know, what is it that you love more about it? Is it the getting out and just shooting, or is it the final product?
The getting out, definitely. The final product is just icing on the cake. I love being able to share my final photos and say, look what I captured, but getting out is the best part. If I didn't enjoy getting out, I wouldn't be doing this. Most nights, especially setting up your camera and being able to just set it up and enjoy the night. That's why I focus on that so much, is because I get to enjoy my night sky and I get to see it for myself. When I'm involved with a lot of people on nights the northern lights are out, or whether or not there's noctilucent and clouds, whatever might be out, my goal is to enjoy it for myself. I want to be off my phone as much as possible. I don't want to be sitting behind the camera going, oh, this is a perfect shot. I want to just sit back and enjoy it. I want a time lapse of that night, because I can go back and watch it and go, oh, I remember that. I remember seeing that part dance and really cool parts. But then I just enjoy sitting back and enjoying it. So I would definitely say the chase itself, the seeing new locations, the being able to try out new things is great, but just enjoying it and sitting back and going, this is my life. I get to sit and watch the stars. A lot of people wish they had that. I get to watch the Northern Lights multiple times a month and just enjoy it.
I bet there's a lot of people listening right now thinking, yep, I wish I could do that. That sounds wonderful. Justin, is there anything that I didn't ask you today that you want to make sure that people know or understand fully about astrophotography?
Yeah, I would say that there's so many people out there that do it that you don't realize are out there. I can speak for Canada just because that's where I'm from, but when it comes to Northern Lights especially, or the astrophotography groups, Canada has different locations and different Facebook groups. Facebook is your best friend when it comes to it. There's Art of Night photography groups, there's astrophotography, Milky Way photography groups. There's so many groups out there that they're made to help you learn. When it comes to Northern Lights, I run a group called Manitoba Aurora Astronomy, and our entire purpose is to let people know that there's stuff happening in the night sky. If the Northern Lights are happening, we keep people up to date so that they see that the Northern Lights are out. Well, I'll actually post saying, hey, Northern Lights look really good tonight. I would recommend going out. And the entire comment section on that post, which we call a thread, is filled with people saying, I'm at so-and-so location and this is what I'm seeing. I'm at so-and-so location. Oh, did you guys just see that really bright meteor? So we try to keep people up to date, especially with the aurora. Not so much with night sky for threads, just because, it's kind of consistent with night skies.
Every single night.
But for aurora, it's a little bit more. We keep people up to date and we're talking the entire time. And I'll say, I'm sitting at home right now and I think it's time I'm going to go for a drive. The data is looking really good. There's Manitoba Aurora and Astronomy, Saskatchewan Aurora Hunters, Alberta Aurora Chasers. There is Great Lakes Aurora Hunters, I think it is, and they're for the Great Lakes in Canada and the U.S. That's a great area. Colorado, Michigan, I believe. And there's so many different groups out there. Once you move further down into the southern states, I have a lot of astrophotography groups, but look for your locals. Most states, most provinces have their own photography groups of astrophotography, and they're filled with a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, I bet, people definitely more knowledgeable than I, for sure. And I'm sure that, correct me if I'm wrong, are groups like this typically pretty welcoming of new people who are, just trying to get started into something like this? If somebody's listening and they want to learn more about it, would this be a good place for them to start?
Absolutely. The groups there, all they want is people to learn and follow their passion as well. I know for me, if someone posts in the group saying, hey, I'm looking at getting a camera, well, I'm first one in there saying, this is what I recommend. This is what I would do personally. If someone's asking questions, we actually have guides in our group that will have all your questions answered. So your quick little frequently asked questions are in there. If you want to learn more about how to take photos, there's a full guide on how to take photos in the night sky in there. If you want to learn how to chase the northern lights and how to actually predict them for yourself, there's full guides on how to understand that there, from a beginner to an intermediate. I have that all on my website as well. So our whole purpose is that we want our community to grow. And if we try to keep everyone included. I have so many people, whether it's people in their late 50s, 60s, or whether it's someone, I know someone who's 15 just down the road from me who's learning all about chasing the northern lights. And he's actually messaged me multiple times saying, hey, get out, look, they're out. And he's beat me to it. So there's so many people out there that are just a wealth of knowledge and we're willing to teach too. So, and it's great to see people get involved, because the more people that can get involved, more people that can help newcomers, and then the hobby gets to grow. And there's nothing better than meeting another photographer out at night when you're out taking photos.
Yeah, no, that is fun. It's always, the camaraderie there is always great. Justin, before I let you go, I got to say thank you, obviously, for coming on and sharing as much as you did. This has been a great chat. I can tell that you're very passionate about this. It came through in the interview. I really appreciate it. For those listening who are thinking the exact same thing right now, where can they find you online and see some of your work?
Yeah, for sure. My photography is all my name. So it's Aurora and then J Anderson. You can find me on Instagram at Aurora J Anderson. Twitter, it's Aurora J Anderson. On Facebook, that was taken, so I had to use Aurora Justin Anderson. So that works as well. You can find me on Facebook at the Manitoba Aurora and Astronomy. You'll see me posting there a ton, just because I'm the one that created that group. But Aurora Justin Anderson on Facebook is the one where you can find me. My website is aurorajanderson.com, so feel free to go there. You can check out all my photos. You can ask about if you're interested in buying a print. I also have a lot of blogs about what you can expect for the night sky each month, as well as what my comet chase. I have that entire thing recorded, so you can read through it and see the photos I took throughout the entire sequence of all 12 nights and how I struggled with that sometimes and the entire battle. A lot of videos are on there as well, and I'm working on putting up some more tutorials on how I edit, as well as I have lessons coming up. So if you actually want a one-on-one lesson with me, learning how to take photos with your own camera, those are coming up here as well soon. And then lots of information on aurora chasing as well. So if you're either going up north or you live, I'd say in the northern states or anywhere in Canada really, and you want to learn how to chase the northern lights for yourself, there's tons of information from beginner levels to intermediate levels there.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Start a conversation. Grow together. That is it for this week. Remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.